Look at Joel's hands, at the light piercing through Nathan Drake's ear, the pristine skyline of the City of Glass, the crumbling cliffs and forgotten crypts of Tomb Raider, the impossible technology, the brushed metal, the picturesque landscapes. It's all visual perfection, and it sucks. Okay, maybe sucks is a little bit dramatic, but I'm not saying the ceaseless march towards perfection in computer rendering is a bad thing. In fact, it's something I find really interesting and really cool. I love seeing the latest major release pop up on Steam, take $90 to $100 out of my wallet, that's Australian dollars, and then take 7 years to download because it's 250 gigs. I'll have to delete half the shit on my computer just to download it. And then watching it destroy my graphics card as it tries to render every sweaty pore on Brut's face. Or watching Lara Croft's death rendered in the most grotesquely realistic detail so many times that it becomes comical instead of disturbingly realistic. But goddamn does it look pretty. I love listening to Digital Foundry. All the guys over there talking about all the fancy rendering tech that's coming out and all the different ways that we're making things more and more realistic. I love nerding out over all that kind of cool tech, like how variable rate shading makes it more effective at rendering detail where detail needs to be rendered and rendering less detail to save time there, and all the crazy path tracing methods to get realistic lighting like sparse voxel octree global illumination. Do you know what that is? I don't really either, but it sounds really fucking cool. Okay, deep breath. That's not the point of this video. The point I'm trying to make is that the end result is boring. Ellie and Nathan and Aloy and whatever the characters are in Assassin's Creed, I don't know, all look insanely detailed and it's really impressive. But they and their respective worlds all kind of look the same. And I feel like that's an opportunity missed to make these games so much more impactful than just another release. In 10 years, are we going to look back on the latest Assassin's Creed in the same way that we look back on Wind Waker or Mirror's Edge? I don't think so. The original Mirror's Edge came out in 2008, 15 years ago now. I was 10 when that came out, and 15 years down the line, it still looks amazing. Sure, there are some flaws. The character models are questionable.
What's the difference between a wet raccoon and Donald J. Trump's hair?
And the textures in some places, not amazing, though Catalyst also falls short on that. And 8 years down the line, you know what? Catalyst didn't do a whole lot better. And I remember a whole lot more of the original Mirror's Edge than I do of Catalyst. And that's because Mirror's Edge has style. I love games that try unusual things because there's so much more room for creative freedom, for creative expression, because you're not trying to be realistic. You're not trying to convince the person watching or playing that what is happening could or is happening in real life, in a real world environment, in a real world scenario, with real world physics and real world textures and light and everything. Mirror's Edge has aged so well because it has style. Look at these rooms, the light, the color. Where was all of this in Catalyst? Where was the striking contrasts, the really weird room layouts that didn't really make sense in a real world way, but were tons of fun to explore and navigate around? Where did the style go? Even if Catalyst had better characters, better writing, even better gameplay, you can watch my video on Mirror's Edge and how it compares to Catalyst. We won't get into that too much because I have done a whole video on it. I don't remember anything from Catalyst that really stuck with me the same way that many scenes in the original Mirror's Edge did, like that bold red hallway that you go down and the SWAT team comes out of the elevator, and that strong black contrast against the white and the bold red is amazing. And those orange offices where you're in the dark corridors in the back and then you go into this atrium, it's just the sunlight spilling through to this beautiful orange room. Or like the vaporwave blue and pink subway tunnels. It was just amazing. And Catalyst doesn't have any of that charm. Mirror's Edge is filled with moments of impactful color and scenery and setting that a lot of games lack. I think most people that have played both games would probably be in the same boat as me, that while Catalyst was fun and honestly pretty enjoyable, it doesn't last. It doesn't stick with you like the original Mirror's Edge does. There weren't moments in Catalyst where I stopped and just stared for a moment or two. But in the original Mirror's Edge, there was a moment like that in every level. And look, that's not to say that the original Mirror's Edge is perfect. It is 15 years old. The character models, like I said, look like really high quality Roblox characters rather than something I expect out of DICE. And the 2D cutscenes are definitely a choice that they made, but damn if the game doesn't have style. The textures aren't stellar, but when you're vaulting over railings and busting through doors, that doesn't matter. When you're going at a breakneck speed, the lighting and the color does all the heavy lifting that the textures don't need to do. And all that aside, when you stop to breathe, it still looks phenomenal. Why does Mirror's Edge still hold up? How does it still hold up? Well, because of the same exact reason that the original Toy Story looked so good when it came out and looked so good for so long. Toy Story hit theaters in 1995 as the first fully computer animated feature film. That's a pretty big title. Unlike many of the CGI horrors of the 90s and early 2000s that we saw everywhere, Toy Story looked pretty solid and did for a really long time. Part of that is the fact that Pixar wasn't trying to mix real-world imagery and computer-generated imagery, a combination that didn't work out so well for a lot of creations back then. But the other choice that they made, which I think is the significantly more impactful one, is the fact that all the characters are toys. And we'll explain why. Conscious of the limitations of mid-90s computer animation, Pixar decided that, hey, what if all the characters were toys? And that's just not trying to appeal to kids to sell more toys, though I don't imagine the characters had to be toys to sell them. But because back then, rendering plastic was easy. You don't have to worry about all the little details that make skin look real, or the way that light scatters under the epidermis to illuminate your blood vessels and give skin that sense of life. Plastic doesn't need that. Toy Story still looks really good because of great creative direction. There are great shots throughout that movie that I would still say is my wallpaper, because their use of lighting and color is so much more important than the textures and the rendering techniques that they use to get that image in the end. That focus of Pixar being like, we can do plastic pretty well, so let's focus on that, is exactly what has kept Mirror's Edge looking so good. Mirror's Edge doesn't try to create the most realistic characters, as we have already dunked on.
Wet raccoon.
Instead, it played into what computers were pretty good at rendering in real time back in 2008. Coarse, concrete surfaces, worn metal scaffolding, polished glass windows, dusty construction site floors. It's shiny and grimy and light and dark all at the same time because they focus on what we were good at rendering and avoided the materials we weren't. That's working smarter instead of harder, and it paid off because the game still looks so damn good. Another game that makes a similar impact with its use of color and style is Superhot. I didn't put anything on the screen or play any sounds, but you probably heard the iconic super hot or the... It's so simple but brilliantly stylish. Say what you will about the game itself. I feel like the core gameplay loop loses its appeal pretty quickly once the novelty wears off, but it has so much style. The punchy, contrasting colors and living the slow-mo fantasy that we all wanted to experience since we first saw The Matrix made a real impact on the cultural collective consciousness of gamers. By the way, if you ever get a chance to play Superhot in VR, absolutely do. It is massively better than the original flat screen game, and I highly recommend it. Even a bad game can make itself memorable with a strong visual style. A couple of years ago, I reviewed North, a short narrative experience that focuses on a refugee assimilating into a new, very foreign feeling city that is incredibly unwelcoming while they're separated from their family. Go watch that video if you want to get full story on North and what the whole deal is. I think I reviewed it a bit too harshly back then, looking back at it, but it's still not great. But the weird surrealist imagery that is used to represent the feelings of alienation and isolation in a cold, unwelcoming environment has really stuck with me, and that deserves credit. In a similar vein, Awkward Dimensions isn't explicitly a good game, which I did talk about in my Subjectivity of Art video, but the jumbled mess of surrealist environments that are used to communicate a simple but very clear and very emotionally moving story has stuck with me. The aesthetic simplicity of games like Journey take the focus away from the small details like really fancy leaves and grass, or the way that light refracts through someone's ear, and puts it on vistas and scenery and mood. Hey, just a quick editor's note interjecting here. While I was editing this section, it just made me think of this quote from Maya Angelou.
I've learned that people will forget what you said, and people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel.
And to me, that resonates really well with what I'm saying about mood here, that it doesn't matter what the set pieces are, how fancy the grass or leaves are, or if you can see light refracting through Nathan Drake's ear, which I still think is crazy cool, but it's what it all made you feel that sticks with you. And that's why games like Journey have stuck in my head more than so many other games that I've played. Mad shout out to Maya for recording that little line for me. Very much appreciated. Go check her out. She has a lovely voice. She's done some lovely covers, and she also streams. I'll link her stuff down below.
Just bamming your boozle. My goodness. Is that another word for boinking? Hey babe, you wanna bam our boozles later? Hey babe.
Anyway, back to the video. And to me, personally, my 1 3-hour playthrough of Journey from like 6 years ago has stuck with me more than most games that I've played since then. All these very minimalist examples maybe aren't painting the right light. I'm not saying that style is all just boiling it down to simple shapes and colors.
Shapes and colors the likes of which I've never seen.
However, Dishonored and Borderlands are both games that do great things with their detail. Borderlands is probably most known for its very recognizable, cel-shaded, cartoony aesthetic. Basically a comic book come to life. And Dishonored has such a wonderful painterly style that feels like every artist of every texture is trying to tell a story with every single pixel that they have. And I haven't had a game make me feel like Dishonored has in terms of its art until I watched Arcane. Arcane's fucking great. If you haven't watched it, go watch it just for the animation. Both the city of Zorn in Arcane and the city of Dunwall in Dishonored feel like every artist involved in painting every texture are trying to tell a compelling story with every single pixel they've got. And I love it. It's gorgeous. It breathes such life and such character into what could have been a pretty forgettable environment. This isn't to say that realism is making games less important or less memorable than their more stylized counterparts. Just that realism is kinda overused sometimes. Across movies, television, radio, online media, realism is the default. It's familiar. If given the chance, breaking away from realism is an opportunity to explore new territory, to create a memorable experience that takes us to a world that is like nothing else we've ever experienced. I feel like video games and animation are very much in the same boat. Neither of them are inherently realistic. That is just what comes with the medium. And when trying to mimic realism, it's kind of a betrayal to the format, to the stories that you could be telling. As much as I love the crazy technology that goes into rendering these hyper-real scenes that, in some cases, look more real than our own actual world, I much prefer something a little less familiar, something that makes fantasy more fantastical, that makes the adventure more adventurous. To me, escapism is a whole lot easier when the world I'm escaping to doesn't feel like a mimicry of my own. Thank you for watching. I do really appreciate it if you made it all the way to the end. If you're here, tell me what your favorite example of hyperrealism in video games is, or your favorite stylized game. I'm sure there are tons more than I talked about in this video, but those are just the most relevant examples I could think of. If you like an art major making videos about art, who would have known? These videos here might interest you. And otherwise, I also stream on Twitch, which link is down below, and mostly play Minecraft, but other stuff as well. But anyway, thank you for watching. I do very much appreciate it, and I'll see you around. Peace.